Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Crash, and today we're here to rate every single ongoing weekly Shonen Jump manga that we didn't on part 1, because this is part 2. In the first part, I bullet reviewed the 7 established manga in the magazine, so check that one out first if you haven't. But like I said there, I think this is the most important part to watch. To understand why, I want to talk about 2 things that I didn't mention on any of the previous reviews that I probably will on some of the next ones, and that is the table of contents and axed manga. Shonen Jump starts too many new manga per year, and it can only hold so much at a time. So what generally happens is that a lot of manga gets axed early on, gets cancelled, and is forced to reach a rushed ending. And more often than not, those manga are new manga that are just a couple months old, with 1 or 2 volumes that didn't sell well during that little time frame. It's a brutal system that rewards quick results. Most of the 2019 newbies fell short, with only 2 series still in the magazine right now. The table of contents comes into play because, generally speaking, the most famous manga tends to be put on the front of the magazine and the least popular in the back. It's not as clear-cut as that, however, and it can't be used as a faithful metric. However, if a manga remains in the last 3, 4, 5 spots in the magazine for months and months, then it may mean that it's not doing well in the surveys from the fans, it's not selling as well, or just simply not getting enough support from the editor-in-chief, which shows a lack of trust in the manga. Neither of those options are good, and they tend to signal that these manga may be the next ones to go. And you know, 2020 is a weird ass year, and it was too for Jump, because a lot of their big titles just ended. Kimetsu no Yaiba, IQ, Yuna and The Promised Neverland, and of course the cancellation of Act Age. And Chainsaw Man and We Never Learn just ended as well. This made newbies able to last way more than most of them would in other years, but I'm not sure how many of them will survive 2021, because the rest of the big series are unlikely to end that soon. Maybe My Hero Academia, and that's just our speculation based on the scope of the recent arc. So my guess is that in 2 or 3 months, we're going to start seeing some of these manga being discarded, which is why supporting them is important. I ask that if any of these manga seem interesting to you, even if it's one I talk negatively about, please check them out. The mangaka are working as hard as they can to survive in this brutal regime, and the point of this video, more than sharing my opinion, is to share the manga, and hopefully get more people to reading them. So let's just get on with it. It's very weird to me to see Yozakura Family as the now 6th oldest manga in the magazine. Yozakura Family is one of the 2 manga from 2019 to reach the end of 2020 alive, and it's one that was struggling at first to establish a fan base, but I think it's been in the magazine long enough to finally have one. It tells the story of Taiyo, a boy who finds himself married to his childhood friend Mutsumi, and that now has to join their family of spies. I think the problem that Yozakura had was finding an identity, because this manga is a bit of a battle shonen, a bit of a gag manga, a bit of slice of life with rom-com elements. I don't think people knew what to expect from Yozakura, and they didn't know what to want from Yozakura. It's supposedly about the family, and we spend the first volume or so exploring them, but then we spend an awful while just being about Taiyo, while at the same time introducing a lot of brand new characters that felt unneeded. But little by little, the manga started to improve. Part of it was a bigger focus on the story, while most of the manga is still basically episodical. We do have a goal now, a main mystery, and a main villain. It helps make things more focused. However, the best thing in this manga to me is Mutsumi by a long shot. I love watching the main couple interact because they are married. There is nothing forcing a slow romance or dragging their relationship out till the last chapter. They are a couple, they are in love, and we can see them being cute and wholesome with each other, and I'm all for it. But Mutsumi is just a delight every time she is on screen, and she elevates this manga a lot. I want to give a final shout out to the double spreads because they are really good. They have this shine to it that looks gorgeous, and it's just the cherry on top of this 8 out of 10 manga. And from December of 2019, though technically starting in issue number 2 of 2020, we have Agravity Boys. The story of 14 astronauts were sent to the planet Alpha Jumbro on a mission 2 days before the planet Earth gets sucked in by a black hole. Now it's up to them to either find a way to save the world, or more likely, find a way to survive as the last humans alive. With that plot, it may seem to be a dark, greedy manga, but it's not. Gravity Boys is the first of a ridiculous amount of gag manga in the second half of the magazine, but it's also one of my favorites. It's a manga that's just so ridiculous and focuses a lot on having few but solid characters. It takes time to explore why these characters are dumb and cool, and how that helps a lot in the comedy, because it just builds up upon the foundation of chapter 1. There's various times where it may look like the manga is about to take a turn and become something else, but it's almost always a swerve and it just goes back to being what it is. And this is a manga that isn't doing that well. It's been on bottom 5 for most of the year, though there's always manga doing worse than it, so it survives. It's one manga where I felt a bit more trust and promotion from Jump could do wonders to improve its sales. I just think people don't even try to give it a chance, and they're missing out because this manga can be hilarious and awesome and just plain weird. Honestly, I'd say read the first 3 chapters. In my opinion, the 3rd chapter is one of the most funny in the manga so far, together with the last couple ones. And if you like the first 3 chapters, you should continue because you'll like the rest of the manga. But if you don't, then I don't think you'd like the rest, to be honest. Since I started working on this video, however, the ending of Gravity Boys has been confirmed, and that saddens me a lot. Probably the X that hurts me the most so far. Yeah, I'm giving it an 8 out of 10, and despite its ending, I do hope more people end up reading it. Moving to the first batch of 2020, we have the 2 manga that Jump seems to be more keen in promoting as part of their Boost campaign, Mashle and Undead Unluck. First came Undead Unluck, and it's probably one of the most interesting battle shonens out of all the rookies this year. It's also one of the very few manga that got me invested in page 1, where we see a girl finish reading her favorite manga and immediately declare that she's going to kill herself. Before she jumps into an oncoming train, however, a buff and naked guy decides to do the same. These 2 characters are Andy, or Undead, someone who has the uncontrollable power to negate his own death, therefore can't die, and Fuko, or Unluck, the girl who has the uncontrollable power to negate the luck of people she touches. These are the main characters, and what got me very interested in the very first chapters of this manga was how they are completely different from other battle shonen characters in terms of fighting style. For most battle shonens, even the ones with characters with wild and out there powers, the main characters tend to have very simple fighting mechanics, generally punches or throwing projectiles. And Undead very much fits the stereotype there, but it's with Fuko that things get interesting. We fight mostly by having her deliver some of her unluck to Undead, and Undead rushing to the opponent and let nature take its course. Will a plane fall? Will an explosion happen? Will an earthquake destroy the surroundings? The possibilities are endless. But that's not the only reason to read Undead Unluck, and the other one only slowly reveals itself after a couple of chapters, and that's the world building. Now, I don't want to spoil or ruin anything because I think it's more interesting to find out more about it by yourself, but I'll just say that the world surrounding Undead and Unluck is one of the most compelling worlds I've seen in a while, and a big reason why Undead Unluck is one of the ones I'm always eager to read. With that said, there's still things here and there that need perfecting. The art style, the characters, and some of the battles, it's not a 10 out of 10 manga. At least not yet. It's more of diamond in the rough kind of situation, but hopefully as time goes on, Yoshifumi will perfect this manga more and more. For now, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. A week after Undead Unluck, we got Mashle, a manga with the exact same plot as Black Clover, being about a boy without powers in a fantasy world where everyone had magical powers. Mash, the main character, is then kind of One Punch Man-ish, in that he worked hard to build his body to make up for the lack of magic, so he's now the most ridiculously strong creature on the planet, and no matter what powers the other characters have, can just defeat him with one single punch. And I'm not sure if these similarities are intended, although the comedy style does seem very one-influenced, but what clearly is blunt and intended is the Harry Potter similarities. Mash is invited to go to magical school, which is Hogwarts, where he meets Dumbledore, McGonagall, and the Sorting Hat, which is not a hat, it's just this thing that puts him in this world's Gryffindor and then proceeds to play Quidditch. And honestly, at first, just these comparisons with other manga and franchises kinda drove me away from it, because it did felt like it wasn't doing anything original. But as time went on, and I kept reading it, I started to get more and more invested in the story, because in all honesty, it was funny. The characters introduced in the first couple of arcs also really helped this manga. And of course, the best part of Mashle is watching Match just beat the hell out of someone who thinks they are better than Dao. These are always the best moments in the manga. This manga is always a mix of battle and gag, but it's in the last arc that ended that we start to see problems surfacing. With a main cast of 5 or 6 characters now, it makes sense to have battles between characters not named Mash, and these battles just aren't as interesting or fun compared to the alternatives that the magazine offers. They just end up feeling bland. Mashle needs Mash, and Mashle needs its comedy to survive. But the other major problem that I start having with Mashle is actually the jokes. The jokes inserted in the middle of these recent battles have mostly felt forced and not really funny, which ruins the entire point of the jokes. It made the last arc one of the most annoying arcs in Jump in recent times to me, and that hurts its score by a lot. I'll give it a 6 out of 10, and I hope it gets better again. We need more Mash just going berserk, and we need to make the jokes not feel forced. Mashle isn't going to work just as a traditional battle shonen either. At least I don't think it is as appealing as the others in that part alone. But if Mashle and Gravity Boys aren't enough for your yag fix, well, don't worry, because there's more. A lot more. But firstly, we have Moriking starting in April of 2020, which has what I think is the most wild and ridiculous premise of the current roster. Shota awaits eagerly as this pet insect turns from pupa to a full-fledged rhinoceros beetle, but when the pupa opens, a grown and naked man appears in front of him and his sister. He declares that he is Moriking, one of the many insects who are contenders to be the next forest king. And that's it. We mostly follow Moriking and the family as people react to how ridiculous his existence is, either by blindly accepting it or aggressively contesting it. And it was pretty fun. It made me laugh a couple of times throughout the first couple of chapters. The characters that got introduced pretty fast in my opinion, but they weren't that many, so I can't say I got overwhelmed or anything. However, right now at chapter 33, it seems very much like the manga has done everything it could have done. The joke has run through the ground and that reflects itself on the sales. While Volume 1 sold decently, Volume 2 was one of the worst performing volumes of the year for Jump. And Volume 2 isn't really Moriking at its worst, since the quality just kept dropping. Yet it's not like I can say that it doesn't change or evolve, since the recent arc very much fuses the ridiculous plot with battle shonen influences in a tournament arc that very much feels like the conclusion of the story. I'm not sure if it's ending soon or not, according to rumors it is, but right now I can't see anything else for Moriking to do. I'll give it a 5 out of 10, and I'm not really the kind of guy who wishes for a manga to be cancelled, but if it does keep going, I can only see my score getting lower and lower, unless something drastically changes. Moving to June, we have my favorite Jump batch of the past 2 years, with 3 fantastic manga that I really like, and also Ayakashi Triangle. Leading the batch, Ayakashi Triangle is a manga by veteran Kentaro Yabuki of Black Cat and To Love Ru fame. Actually, I haven't gotten around to reading any Yabuki manga, so this is my first contact with his works, and I got very disappointed. While originally it was because I thought this was going to be another rom-com to eventually take We Never Learned place, and it turned out to be more of a battle shonen, after the initial shock, there's still a lot of flaws in this manga. Firstly, I'm not sure if this is just a contractual thing for Yabuki after To Love Ru, but this is the most ecchi manga in the magazine right now. The problem is that the ecchi moments feel incredibly forced in the way they are inserted in the plot. The very first ecchi moment has the main character grab the girl's legs and fondle them because "did you got fat?", which is completely unrelated to the conversation before and after that page, but sure. We need to see the girl's bare legs. I really don't mind ecchi. As a matter of fact, a decent amount of my favorite manga are ecchi, but if they're just forced into the story, then it becomes annoying. Plus, I either dislike or don't care for most of the characters. While the main duo aren't necessarily horrible, Shirogane and Soga, the most prevalent side characters, are some of the most annoying characters in Jump right now. The few characters that I do find myself enjoying a bit aren't focused enough to save this manga for me. The battle manga aspect of Ayakashi Triangle isn't necessarily that interesting either. The exercising yokai, spirits, curses, demons, etc. It's something that exists in abundance in the magazine right now, even on cancelled titles like Bone Collection. So it really isn't anything that I was eager to read more, nor does it stand as the most interesting of those types of manga, especially compared with Jujutsu Kaisen, which isn't even one I like, and Phantom Seer. To me, the saving grace of this manga is the art style, which is fantastic. It at least makes the ecchi scenes look beautiful, but that alone isn't enough to make this manga a good read. It's one of my least favorite in the magazine, and I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. Also from a veteran, we have Hardboiled Cop and Dolphin, which gets the award for the worst title in the magazine. This one is written by the same mangaka as Beelzebub and Angry Marie, Ryuhei Tamura. Now, Beelzebub is one of my favorite comedy manga I've ever read, and Angry Marie, while arguably weaker, continues to have Tamura's trademark deliveries all over. Dolphin is still a Tamura manga, but it's also a clear evolution of his style. From page 1 we can see a drastic improvement in his art style, which was one of my biggest problems with Beelzebub, while still maintaining his drawing style. But it also sees a decrease in jokes. They are still there and Tamura still knows how to deliver them, but the story is definitely more serious and on the forefront this time around. And I really don't want to tell you much about it because I think it's one that's better to experience by yourself, but you follow a police officer who got transferred to a remote island and got a new partner, a beautiful and buffed dolphin, hence the name. The story so far has been more of a mystery thriller with gags here and there, but it's also shown a great opportunity to become a very interesting battle shonen with a few couple fights to surpass everything that Beelzebub ever did. For me, to say that this manga has the chance to be the best that Tamura has released is saying a lot, but I do think that's the case. It just needs a bit more time to breathe. With what's out so far, I'm going to give it an 8.5, and it's one of the ones I have more hopes for out of all the newbies. Next on the line is Magu-Chan, God of Destruction, a story about Magu Menueku, a god of destruction who was killed 600 years ago, finally setting himself free, just to discover that his body is extremely weak now. He's then found by Ruru, a middle schooler from a remote island that decides to take care of him. Magu-Chan is yet another gag manga, and it's definitely my favorite manga out of all the rookies. The whole point of it is being very wholesome, and it may not be the manga with the most funny jokes, but it is the one that makes me smile the most because it's just so adorable. And I think that especially in times that we are, it's important to have a manga in the magazine whose purpose is just that, to make you smile and give you a bit of happiness. The coolest part of the manga is how the mangaka distorts the scenarios of Magu to make it be more wholesome. He carries around and asks people to sign a BFF book because he wants followers, and he works hard to clean Ruru's house to show that he can grant any wish that she wants, just to give you some examples. And as more gods pop up, it becomes fun to see their little weak selves interact and compete with each other in adorable battles. It's a manga that really helps when I'm feeling down. I'm just going to give it a 9 out of 10. I think it's a manga that's been handled perfectly so far, and again, easily one of my favorites in the magazine right now. Finally, the last of the batch is Me and Roboco, yet another gag manga. Roboco is by Shuhei Miyazaki, I hope I'm spelling that right, who previously worked on a parody manga of The Promised Neverland. And Roboco is very much a parody comedy itself. It's in that style that it diverges itself from other gag manga in the magazine. The core story is simple. It's about a boy called Bondo who asks his mom for another maid like the ones his friends have. But his mother orders a cheap second-hand model, and what appears in front of his house is Roboco, which doesn't behave nor look anything like the normal order maids. From there on out, the plot is very much secondary to the comedy, which is more often than not references to some kind of jump manga. From small things like Roboco being a huge Jujutsu Kaisen fan, to battle shonen parodies, to scene-by-scene recreations of manga like Promised Neverland and IQ. It's definitely a manga that's more fun if you know your jump and if you like fourth wall breaking jokes. I do think Roboco is great at handling that kind of comedy. I also really love how everything about this manga is an homage to Rayman. Down to the volume cover, the characters, main plot, setting, everything reminds me of the Rayman, which is one of my childhood anime. So far, I have enjoyed every single chapter that has been released, and I personally think that this manga is a bit underrated. So if you skip this one because it's just another gag manga or because of how it looks, I definitely recommend checking it out. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. And now we're kind of reaching the ones where I don't have much to say because they don't have much out. It's very much my first thoughts for the next couple of manga. Starting with Phantom Seer, released in August, this is another manga about exercising things, in this case phantoms, and I think that's the main problem with this manga. I don't think the manga is bad at all. As a battle shonen, it does the job well. It's been some very solid 17 chapters so far. I could see this being a big deal in the upcoming years, and while it's doing pretty badly in recent talks, the sales have been decent. Although to me, what I think is the problem is that we have an overdose of these kind of stories in recent times. Jujutsu Kaisen, Chainsaw Man, Ayakashi Triangle, Bone Collection, the one shot by Food Wars duo and the one shot by the Promised Neverland duo as well, all kind of fit in the same genre. While it's not the worst, it has too much of a competition from manga that got released first. But the thing to me that Phantom Seer has that others don't is the Phantom designs. The art is by Kento Matsura, who had previously worked on Tokyo Shinobi Squad, and while that manga had good art style by itself, I don't think it showed the full capabilities of the artists. But Phantom Seer is a different case. The creatures all look mesmerizing, beautiful, and terrifying. It's creatures that can really bring genuine horror to this battle manga. I do hope this manga survives, and I'm currently giving it a 7.5 out of 10. Moving to the final gag manga we will be talking about today, High School Family is a story about Kotaro, a boy about getting to high school, and finds out his parents are about to joining him because they never got a superior education. His sister is a genius, and so she's skipping middle school to join high school as well, and his cat is also joining because that's a joke. This is another manga where I feel like the problem isn't necessarily about the manga on a vacuum, and more about how it fits with the roster of the magazine, or more precisely, how it doesn't. There's just too many gag manga, and while Magu-Chan adds something by being more about being wholesome, and Roboco adds something by parodying the rest of the magazine, High School Family doesn't really have anything to stand out. And I'll admit that the first chapter was pretty funny, but after that it just kind of was there. It's still a manga that I like reading weekly, and I think the fact that its chapters are shorter than the rest helps not get it tiring too fast, but it's also a manga that I wouldn't be affected if it was gone. I'm just going to give it a 7 out of 10. And before we move to the last batch of the year, we have Our Blood Oath, a story about two siblings, a vampire and a human, and their Blood Oath. Basically, they have a contract where the human can use a bit of vampire's power. And that's kinda it. A lot of manga uses chapter 1 to set up what the story is about. One Piece lets you know that Luffy is trying to find the titular treasure, Naruto tells you that Naruto is going to try to beat the Hokage, and even things like Bleach that don't set up the final goal does set up the events of the first arc. That doesn't happen here, and I'm willing to forgive that if the story explains itself later on. Hardboiled and Dolphin doesn't really explain the point right away, but it does let you know that there's a mystery to solve, and we get more details in the first couple of chapters. But with our Blood Oath, we are at chapter 15 right now, almost 2 full volumes in, and I still don't get much of the point of the entire thing. Everything just feels so pointless and directionless. The characters themselves don't sell it either, as I find the main duo a bit boring, and I don't think the side characters have been used properly either. For example, the central character of chapter 1 is just a random dude who is irrelevant from chapter 2 and onwards. This manga has some cute art style, I like it, but it feels like there's nothing else for people to grab onto, to run to read it. It's extremely weak, the worst manga in the magazine right now. It feels like the mangaka can't even structure a proper story, so I'm giving it a 3 out of 10. The last 2 manga have been out for relatively little time, so there isn't much out to properly judge. The first is Build King by Mitsutoshi Shimabukuro of Toriko fame, a very out there battle manga about carpenters. And so far this manga was able to hold my interest just by its world alone. To be honest, this manga hasn't been much of a battle manga so far and more so of an adventure one. But it's quite fun to see the mangaka come up with some bizarre ideas that seem so ridiculous individually, but fit perfectly with the theme of carpenters and building houses. First enemies that appear have the sole purpose of destroying houses. Then we get to see a monster who is a house you can actually live in, and more recently creatures whose armor are houses as well. We're just 5 chapters in and there's just so much character in this manga already. I love it. Characters themselves haven't grown on me as much. Their art design also helps at not being that appealing to me. The mangaka just makes everything too plasticky, but there's still time to make me attached to them, so for now I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. And last manga we will be talking about today, it's Sakamoto Days. This manga only has 4 chapters as of now, and I'm not really sure yet if it wants to be a battle manga or a gag manga or a slice of life. It seems to mix all of those, kinda like Yozakura Family did, but it's doing it well enough. It's about a hitman that one day falls in love and throws that life behind him. When we return, he's working at a convenience store and looks like the coach from Slam Dunk, but turns out he's only 27, and I'm pissed that they drew someone my age looking like a grandpa. But the truth is, Sakamoto is way more badass than I'll ever be, so I'll let that slide. The story itself so far has found Sakamoto being thrown into situations with thugs and being forced to use his skills rather begrudgingly. It's really fun, however. The fights themselves look less like things from battle manga and more like scenes from action movies, with arm and cast beating multiple faceless opponents. I'm sure there's going to be a bigger villain at some point, but I want the manga to mostly stay like this, since it sets it apart. Plus, the choreography so far has been great. The first chapter especially was fantastic, and I recommend everyone to check it out if they haven't. I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10 as well, but I'm more excited about this one than I am about Build King, if I'm being honest. And that's it. That's all the manga in the magazine right now. It's always shifting, since part 1 was released, Chainsaw Man, and we never let it end. Gravity Boys is gonna be next, and according to rumors, Moriking is probably not that far off. New stuff will appear and take its place. It's kinda sad, but it's how they maintain the amount of successes that they have. But yeah, this is the video. If you liked it, then please help support this channel by doing the small things that you know what to do. Liking, subscribing, commenting. It's only my second video, so anything you do is visible and important. If you watched it till here, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.